your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney announced his open for summer plan for the province. He says Alberta should be fully reopened by the first part of July. Kenney says it will involve 3 stages and is contingent on case counts continually coming down and more Albertans being vaccinated against COVID-19. Kenney says as long as hospitalization rates are 800 or lower and 50% of Albertans have been vaccinated, the province can move on to stage 1 of reopening. That includes places of worship going back to 15% capacity starting May 28th. As of June 1st, retail capacity will increase to 15% as well. Hair salons and wellness services will reopen but be by appointment only. Outdoor gatherings can increase to 10 people and outdoor patios can reopen to 4 people per table. Kenney says by mid-June, they're hoping to launch stage 2 as long as 60% of Albertans have had their COVID vaccine shot and less than 500 people are in the hospital with the virus.
Stage 2 will be a big step forward. Libraries and movie theaters will reopen, Albertans can return to the gym, and large public outdoor gatherings can resume. Places of worship and retail will see higher capacity limits, going up to 1/3 of occupancy at that point. Restaurants will be able to welcome groups of up to 6, both indoors and outdoors, and the work from home order will be lifted with sports, performance, and recreation activities all resuming. Now, some restrictions will be in place to continue keeping numbers down, driving them down further, so that we can then safely open up altogether.
Kenney says he's hopeful that by July, the province can move on to stage 3, which would lift almost all restrictions except for the mandatory quarantine period for those who test positive for COVID. Meanwhile, Alberta's NDP leader, Rachel Notley, has some concerns about Premier Kenney's summer rollout plans.
The fact is, we don't want this to go on forever. What we do want is to avoid another round 4 of this premier sprinting us into another wave because his political vulnerability is more important than the vulnerability of our health system. This does not look like an evidence-based plan. It looks like the premier is working backwards from the stampede. Will the premier please provide us with the scientific evidence that justifies his decision? He mentioned it. Table it in the House if he's got it.
Many of Alberta's students returned to their classrooms this week. Kindergarten through grade 12 students have been learning online since May 7th, when the province ordered they be sent home as the provincial government dealt with surging COVID cases. Thousands of students in higher grades in Calgary and Edmonton had already been working from home. Students in the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, which includes Fort McMurray, will continue learning from home until at least May 31st, as case rates there remain high. This past week was National Paramedic Services Week. It was an opportunity to recognize hardworking and courageous professionals for their dedicated public services and to thank them for protecting our health and safety. In this next report, video journalist Naveen Day spoke with a retired paramedic and heard some unsettling stories.
Since the early age of 8, Sharissa Clam knew she wanted to become a paramedic, and her dreams came true in 2008 when she started with Calgary EMS. Now retired from the job, Clam says the work is overwhelming, especially with an overburdened support system.
Often there'll be one ambulance available. It's called a red alert in the city of Calgary. So you can imagine the response times can be up to 10 to 15 minutes. The firefighters are usually the first responders to arrive, and a lot of them have training in the medical field. However, the fatigue of call to call, barely even getting to eat or have bio breaks, being pushed and pushed and pushed.
Clam recommends that if you do see an EMS worker, you should give them a big hug. She says the job is rewarding, but takes a huge mental toll. Post-traumatic stress disorder is not uncommon amongst EMS personnel.
The good thing about the job is that you do get to save lives. But however, you also lose lives on the job. And unfortunately, over time, those losses can catch up with the positive saves from too much negativity starting to forget the goodness in the job that they're doing every day and the saves, and they're starting to focus on the negative.
Clam adds that suicide among EMS workers is higher than average. This is fresh in her memory following the news of a work colleague who recently died by suicide.
Up next, will vaccination clinics at the border stay or go away? We'll tell you after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Last week, we brought you the story of our neighbors to the south setting up COVID vaccination clinics along the Canada-U.S. border to help Canadians get vaccinated at a quicker rate, particularly since some of these northern states have had an excess of the doses, and there was a concern about them expiring. Such was the case with the Blackfeet tribe in Montana. The Blackfeet began offering Pfizer and Moderna shots at the Caraway border crossing a month ago. There were around 1,350 doses dished out at that border crossing alone. Well, last weekend, the Canadian government intervened and canceled these clinics. Border agents said Canadians attempting to drive across the American border solely for the COVID shot would be turned away. The Public Health Agency of Canada also chimed in, saying that any Canadian traveling to the U.S. to receive a vaccine shot would not be exempted from a 14-day quarantine upon their return. But according to the Blackfoot Confederacy in Alberta, this decision could be reversed yet again due to pushback and even an online petition. We're being told now that those clinics at the Caraway border will resume on June 8th and 9th. We reached out for an on-camera interview from the Blackfoot Confederacy, but they did not respond in time for this to go to air. Now, according to political reporter Brian Lilly, the Trudeau Liberals also shut down a similar clinic at the Windsor-Detroit border.
The owner of the Ambassador Bridge, it's a privately owned bridge, said, you bring people over and you can do it in the parking lot of my duty-free, which is closed right now because nobody can stop, and they haven't entered the U.S. and they can go back. Public Health Agency and Canada Border Services still said, no, they'll have to quarantine for 2 weeks. They're shutting down every opportunity at communities like this across the country. And the best that anyone can come up with is it would make the Trudeau government look bad if they had to start taking doses from the United States and getting Canadians vaccinated down there. It would expose the hole in his plans. He doesn't want that.
And Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder joined our own Hel Roberts to give her take on Canada's vaccine rollout.
Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder joins me now to discuss the closure of the mobile vaccine clinic at the Caraway border crossing. Rachel, why would the government shut it down if the Blackfeet tribe is willing to offer the help which is needed the most?
Why would this happen? You have extra vaccines that need to be used. They have a certain lifespan. If they're not used within that lifespan, they're going to have to be discarded, which means they become waste. Why wouldn't the Canadian government allow for individuals to go across the border, get their vaccination, sit there for 15 minutes, make sure they're good to go, and then return to Canada? I mean, this is what's been happening for weeks now, and people have proven that they're able to do it safely. So the truth is, Hel, I don't have an answer for you, but I certainly have lots of good questions, and I think Canadians do too. And that is, of course, if these vaccines are available, why would the Canadian government want to prevent individuals from being able to access them?
So what are your thoughts on the way the Trudeau Liberals have handled the vaccine rollout to Canadians?
You know, I think the overall framework with regard to vaccine rollouts has been a disaster from the beginning. Promises that vaccines were coming and then nope, they're not. And then promised that a certain number was coming and then nope, there's a reduction in number. And some of this was avoidable. Some of this was preventable. And of course, that was left up to the Prime Minister and Minister Anand, who is responsible for procurement. They should have been able to negotiate better. And so then that would have allowed for Canadians to be better served in this process. You know, I think another thing that is just worth highlighting here is as much as Canadians are being encouraged to seek out a vaccination, and by all means, every Canadian who desires to be vaccinated should have access. The other thing that should be highlighted, though, is Canadians don't yet know what they can or cannot do once they are fully vaccinated. So, those who are in the United States, they have clear direction from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Canada doesn't have that. Canadians don't have that. And so I think they're really missing the confidence that they desire to go and to be vaccinated and then, to be able to live their lives.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Harder.
We need to take a short break, but we'll be right back with more.
It sounds like caucus meetings were canceled many times, and that is not good. I mean, you're a team. This isn't a one-man show. This is a team, and the team has to be working together. And if one person on the team doesn't know what the other members are doing, that's not good. And all of those people who were elected by the people in their constituencies to look after their constituency, but at a bigger level too, to think of the overall good of the province and how that all works together and how the MLAs all work together.
As public perception of Alberta's government quickly declines and party members are being lost or even thrown away, there are some members of the caucus who still hope for better days ahead. Next, I speak with one of the founding members of the United Conservative Party who recently resigned after serving more than 40 years with Conservative parties in the province. Cathy Smith has worked with Jason Kenney for years, along with some of the members Kenney has recently kicked out of the caucus. Here to shed some light on the public perception of the UCP and Alberta's political landscape is Cathy Smith. Cathy, thanks so much for joining me today. Can you talk a little bit about what's happening with the party and why it's losing popularity? So many people dislike the premier these days, including some of the people who work with him.
I've known Jason Kenney for years, since he first got elected, in the Reform Party days. He was about 24 years old when he went to Ottawa. And so I've known him for all that time. And I just feel like, maybe because of the way he worked in Ottawa under the leadership of Stephen Harper, where Stephen Harper had to keep a tight ship, he had to do that because Conservatives never get a break from the media. They don't. They just don't get a break. You have to be way up here and everybody else is below that as far as, being under the microscope. So I think that could have contributed to his style. And because many of the MLAs are new, they don't know any differently, And so when you see a guy like Todd Loewen coming out finally and saying, this is not right. And I had seen it myself. I had seen that MLAs really were not knowing what was going on. I don't know if they weren't having regular caucus meeting. It sounds like caucus meetings were canceled many times. And that is not good. I mean, you're a team. This isn't a one-man show. This is a team, and the team has to be working together. And if one person on the team doesn't know what the other members are doing, that's not good. And all of those people who were elected by the people in their constituencies to look after their constituency, but at a bigger level too, to think of the overall good of the province and how that all works together and how the MLAs all work together. And that has not been happening.
Yeah, you mentioned Todd Loewen and of course the letter he wrote suggesting Kenney should resign. What was your reaction to that?
I was actually happy that at least one MLA went out, had the courage to say, this is not right, this should not be happening. And, it looks like, the leader should resign. Because then it gets the conversation going. And, unfortunately in Canada, we can't have conversations about anything. Anything that's the least bit controversial, no conversation.
Yeah, well, Mr. Lowen's courage, as you say, got him ousted recently, along with MLA Drew Barnes, who has recently been very vocal about the lockdowns. What was your reaction to both of them being expelled?
I was surprised that that would happen, knowing what's going on in the public and how the public is losing confidence with the continual lockdown, no lockdown, lockdown, no lockdown, schools closed, schools open. And so, people are going, what is going on? And then you start removing people who legitimately have a concern about not only their role as an MLA for their constituency, but also the overall running of the party and of governing, because those members are all supposed to be equally governing with the leader. It's not the leader running the whole show. It's all of those MLAs in the UCP caucus.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today, Kathy. That was Kathy Smith, who recently resigned her position from the UCP. Coming up, are there enough youth being drawn to agriculture? And how many female farmers do you know? Up next, we speak with a young lady who's attracted a global audience with her farming podcast.
I think there's more and more people who are interested in farming and agriculture. And I think it's cool because they're doing it in different innovative ways. They're doing it with the technology behind them. For instance, I drive a tractor that drives itself and turns itself, and I literally don't have to touch the wheel. Like, it's absolutely wild to me.
Welcome back. She's attracted an international audience with her podcast about Alberta's farmers and specifically women in agriculture. She's Alberta born and bred, but did not grow up farming. Joining me is Caitlin Dubin, host of a weekly podcast called Wild Rose Farmer. Caitlin, welcome to the show. Now, please tell us about this podcast of yours.
I started my podcast back in March of 2019. It's called the Rural Woman Podcast, and I focus on sharing and celebrating the stories of women in agriculture. So I started the podcast because I myself was an avid podcast listener while I was in the tractor long hours, and I tried to find podcasts in agriculture that sparked my interest and really shared and highlighted the stories of women in agriculture, because as a new woman in agriculture, I didn't grow up this way. I married into it. So I wanted to find something that I could relate to. And all of the agriculture podcasts that were out there at the time really talked about canola markets and, what kind of tillage you should use and all of that stuff. Though that is interesting, it wasn't really something that I was looking for. So I decided to start my own.
So you've been doing this for a little over 2 years now, and you said there were a lot of podcasts out there, but what makes yours different?
I would say that mine is more story based, and I'm more interested in the story behind the farmer. And I want to know kind of how they got into agriculture, why they got their start, what struggles have they faced as a woman in agriculture. So we kind of dive into a bunch of different topics. So by sharing these stories and different methods and that kind of thing, I think we're building those connections and those inroads within agriculture, as well as sharing our stories to people outside of agriculture, because I think, that connection to where your food comes from is a powerful one.
Mm-hmm. Is it becoming harder to attract young people to farming? Obviously, you're young, but are farmers mostly part of an older generation and it's becoming harder to attract the youth?
I would say yes and no. I feel like there is just a lot of things against younger people coming into agriculture. It's hard work. You have to have the capital behind you. I don't know how people without, the ties and connections would ever be able to afford to purchase land in southern Alberta, like irrigated land. It would be nearly impossible unless you have the capital to back you up. So I think there's more and more people who are interested in farming and agriculture. And I think it's cool because they're doing it in different innovative ways. They're doing it with the technology behind them. For instance, I drive a tractor that drives itself and turns itself, and I literally don't have to touch the wheel. Like, it's absolutely wild to me. I think yes and no, there are barriers for young people, but I think more and more people are becoming interested in growing their own food, which I think is amazing.
Caitlin, are you seeing more women in agriculture these days, or are most of them generational or marry into it like you did?
I believe there are more female farmers than statistics would ever, show. And I believe that there's lots of women in agriculture that would never call themselves a farmer. So whether it's because they don't drive the tractor or whether they don't choose which crop that they put in the ground or any of those things, some of those decisions I don't personally make myself. I learn about them through my husband and the agronomist and all of those things. But for me, that doesn't make me any less of a farmer. I am in the fields. I am in the office. I am doing the work that a farmer does.
And Caitlin, how has the pandemic taken a toll on farming families?
2020 and into 2021 has been just a wild year and a half now of pandemic. And I think, in the beginning, the unknowns were the scariest part. So for us, the unknowns were, are we going to have enough fuel to be able to plant? So I think, people were, the general population was scrounging for toilet paper. And I feel like farmers were scrounging for fuel tanks because we just didn't know. It ended up being okay. Like, we ended up pulling through and things got done. Things like if the tractor would break down, parts would take longer to get in, or there would be that kind of stuff. But other than that, I think we fared pretty well. As for the rest of southern Alberta, I think that farmers, like I said, they're optimists and they're resilient. So I think everybody got it done. I think it's been stressful on, just humans in general. And, we are isolated as is, and then add a pandemic on top of that.
We need to take a short break, but we'll be right back with our top local stories from Lethbridge. Stay with us. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman reacted to the province's open for summer plans and how they will impact our city moving forward. One thing we cannot count on for the second year in a row: fireworks on Canada Day.
I don't anticipate that we would change anything for Canada Day. That takes a lot of planning. And, things are just not in place at the moment. Canada Day is basically 4 weeks away, 4.5 weeks. So we couldn't possibly organize entertainment, organize fireworks, do those types of things in that short a period of time. But I imagine over the next few weeks, as the numbers change, that we will begin reviewing what may or may not occur.
We may not have fireworks, but the province's open for summer plan does bring exciting news for local baseball fans. The Western Canadian Baseball League will go ahead with its first ever all-Canadian roster, and the Lethbridge Bulls have made an announcement that the adjusted season will begin this summer. BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly was at Spitz Stadium to bring us this report.
I can barely contain my excitement. The Lethbridge Bulls will be kicking off their season right here at Spitz Stadium on Friday, June 18th against the Okotoks Dogs. Fans will be invited to join them, but at a limited capacity. Even more exciting news on Canada Day, a doubleheader against the Edmonton Prospects. They are expecting full capacity in the stands.
That's super exciting. The crowd makes the game so much better, and yeah, it's super exciting. Just being around the team, honestly, it's just haven't been able to do anything with the guys, so I'm really excited to just be around the guys every day and get to know them really.
I take it cautiously at the beginning, and hopefully have a few hundred people in the stands to start with, and just monitor it to make sure that we keep all the protocols and safety measures in place. It's more exciting for the players. They've been so isolated in Canada for for so many months now that just having them to go in front of a few hundred people is going to be thrilling for them.
May marks Lyme Disease Awareness Month. The disease starts with ticks burrowing their way into the skin of humans and animals, causing harm. A Lyme disease specialist says she wants to educate the public about ways they can protect themselves from ticks this summer. As Micah Quinn explains, she is speaking from personal experience after being bitten herself.
Sarah Cormode says she found a tick on the back of her head almost 10 years ago, and within a few weeks, she started becoming sick.
And for me, it started with really severe headaches that actually lasted for years, every day for years, and light sensitivity. And then eventually I had neurological complications. So I was having a hard time putting words into sentences and even just doing those automatic things like putting your car into park. And I was really aware that my brain wasn't functioning, but I didn't know what was wrong with me.
Lyme disease is caused by a bacteria called Borrelia, and Cormode says it's important to check for ticks if you're outside.
Places like your head produce a lot of heat. A tick would love to hang out there for some time and feed on you. Other places are your groin, the back of your knees, your armpits. And, somebody even found one in their eyebrow. So it's just good to do a quick check of your whole body. And the other thing is just to be mindful of how you move through. When you're in the outdoors, if you're on a trail, it's good not to be brushing up against the long grass that's coming over the trail.
The Canadian Lyme Disease Foundation provides tick removal kits just in case you encounter a tick or get bitten.
And you want to follow those instructions and remove it from the mouth part. You never want to squeeze the tick because that's going to increase chance of transmission.
Cormode says you can ship off ticks to a private lab called Genetics that will take the tick apart and see what pathogens it might be carrying.
Thank you, Micah. It's a hidden jewel right here in southwestern Alberta that almost went up in flames in 2017. I'm talking about Waterton Lakes National Park. Shamir Suleiman is the vice president of the Waterton Park Chamber of Commerce and owner of the Bayshore Inn. He says when visitors come to Waterton for the first time, they are simply in awe.
They see the pictures, but when you see it live, that valley view, the Prince of Wales Hotel, walking along the beach, the hikes, you almost feel like you're a little bit back in time, a little bit, because you feel like it's the Banff of 40 years ago, where it's all family owned and operated businesses. So your small town ice cream shops, everybody knows everybody. It's all owner operated. So, you walk into Pat's, you're meeting the owner. You walk into my hotel, you're meeting me. You're walking into all the other restaurants. It's their family recipes for generations that have been there. So it's a different feel.
Suleiman will have more on the beauty that is Waterton Lakes National Park coming up later in our show. Stay with us.